listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord!
Praise God! Get away!
Welcome to the House by Video Store podcast. I'm your host, William, and joining me today will be Sean.
Hello.
And that'll be it because Derek is not able to join us. But on this episode, we'll be discussing two movies from the 80s, a series we've never talked about before, Prom Night and Prom Night 2. And those are Canadian slasher flicks that were on Amazon Prime, which is how we watch those. Actually, pretty terrible transfers.
Yeah.
So if you want to watch those, recommend getting the DVD because apparently there are. So that the Amazon transfers are 4:3 letterbox with like the bars on the side, and they don't look very good.
Yeah,
but
the first one looks way worse than the second one. The second one didn't bother me really.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not like one you'd want to like pay for as far as if you were getting a Blu-ray or something like that.
Yeah,
Not
so
at all.
there are versions of them apparently though that are in the widescreen format, not the full screen crop square aspect ratio.
The first one looks like it's a dub from somebody's VHS tape that recorded it off of TV. You know, it looked pretty bad. But that first one, spoiler, I wouldn't recommend buying that one.
Yeah, or if you want to watch it, this isn't the best way to watch it. So we'll talk about Prom Night and Prom Night 2. Before that, we'll go through recent news and things we've been watching. In terms of news, there hasn't been a ton of news. John Carpenter is going to direct a TV pilot that's being written by David Hayter, who wrote or was one of the writers in the first X-Men, and then is most famously, I would think, who was the voice of Solid Snake from the Metal Gear Solid franchise prior to the fifth game in Phantom Pain. So he was the voice of Solid Snake from Metal Gear Solid 1, 2, 3, 4. So he is also a writer, and he was also in Guyver 2, which is a sequel to, I think it was like an anime or manga-inspired movie. Maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't remember. It had that feel. So there's that. John Carpenter hasn't directed much in quite a while. I think the last movie I remember him directing was The Ward, I think in like 2010 or so.
Did you watch that?
I watched parts of it, and I really wasn't digging it, so I just didn't really ever stick with that or finish it out. So we did those soundtrack swap videos, or you started them, where we'd swap the soundtrack of a couple movies, and one of the ones I did eventually, even though it really wasn't swapping the soundtrack of two different movies, it was taking John Carpenter's album Lost Themes and then swapping out some of the scenes from The Thing where they had the Morricone score. So taking The Thing and giving it the John Carpenter synth stuff he himself made years later, and then somebody in the comments on one of the videos suggested doing that to The Ward with Lost Themes, and then they said they started on it themselves but got tired of trying to watch that movie. But John Carpenter is very good, but I think that a lot of stuff soured him on working with studios and how invested is he in that type of stuff. Is it maybe a TV pilot is just a level of investment he needs in a film to be successful, where it's not a multi-year process, it's not taking a piece of your soul, it's more of a gig where you shoot in a limited number of weeks and you have a crew in place and editing crew in place and all that type of stuff. So
you would think the reason he was coming back is because it's a genuine interest, because he's able to make so much money on producing licensing. So at this point, hopefully he has some sort of creative spark and will do something very interesting with it, and not just kind of it's some of these late stage horror film directors, sometimes their output isn't always the best. And I don't know if it comes from a point of them kind of like basically exercising all their creative muscle, on their earlier films, because like they have thought of so many creative things, like Wes Craven, John Carpenter, and it's like, have they kind of just exhausted what they have?
Yeah.
So hopefully Carpenter maybe found some other spark, how John Carpenter got his groove back.
I think it could be something too, kind of like the Rolling Stones or Paul McCartney or a lot of musicians that were huge, biggest, rock stars in the world in the 60s and 70s. But in modern day, it's like have the times just changed and tastes changed,
Yeah.
and their style is still appeals to some of their base, but not the current mainstream. Maybe I just pissed off some fans. I mean, I don't really.
Well, yeah, they're just. I mean,
I don't really listen to any modern day contemporary Rolling Stone songs or the ones that came out,
yeah.
within the period of time in which I was born. So yeah, I mean, like with John Carpenter, hopefully this is like something he's passionate about, and then something where the material clicks, and it's an environment where he's not gonna get bogged down. There's like a lot of directors like Carpenter and like George Romero, and a lot of directors dealing with studios on stuff would get frustrated. So hopefully this is like a more straightforward project that doesn't really have the back and forth and fighting over Final Cut and editing and things like that.
Pretty cool. David Hayter is the writer on it too.
Yeah.
Like that's it. I don't know. I'm interested to see that collaboration, but I really haven't been exposed. I think to much else that he's ever written. I think he's done like some script work on some movies and stuff.
I think he wrote a script for a Metal Gear Solid movie that
Yeah,
they
he
obviously
did that
didn't decide to
too.
move forward with, but.
So that I'm looking forward to that just to see how that turns out.
And then,
if I hear Kurt Russell's on board, then I'll really start getting excited.
But something that piece of news also kind of ties into is, since David Hayter written a script for a Metal Gear Solid movie on spec, the guy that's supposed to direct the actual Metal Gear Solid movie, now whether or not that'll ever happen is a different story, but Jordan Vogt Roberts, who directed Kong Skull Island, so Cinema Sins, which is a YouTube channel and I guess Facebook page and social media presence where they put out the videos like pointing out all the things wrongs in movies or the cinema sins that the movies commit. And they did one for Kong Skull Island, so he went through and kind of repudiated some of their points and went on a little bit of a Twitter tirade or Twitter multiple tweets all around the same subject. And pointed out how some of the things they said were sins weren't, they just didn't get their facts right or things like that.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting when you see directors directly go after, directors, writers, anybody involved in the creative end, going after critics and or YouTube personalities. Because it's a little bit different going after a critic that gave your movie a 6 out of 10 or a 5 out of 10 or a 4 out of 10 or something like that. And then gave like a 1,500 to 2,000 word explanation as to why they did that.
Yes, yeah.
Or a 5,000 word, or there's a difference in going after a critic over their opinion because their opinion is their opinion. Whether or not it's right or wrong, yours varies from theirs. It's really hard to argue on opinion. If somebody has a movie that doesn't click for them, it just doesn't click. I mean, like we do this podcast where we review movies, and I've even had the thought before, it's like now that we make short films and have worked on like other movies, like, what's the line to toe there? But, we don't ever personally attack anybody. It's just talking about the movies.
And it always just tries to come from, I feel like Derek sometimes will be like, it's poop. He doesn't care. Like, he has no dog in the fight, and he's just, I think he approaches it as a normal guy watching movies and just like, he doesn't care about being, having some sort of critical take on it as far as being proper as far as the way he is like going about it. He's just like says what's on his mind. Like I always try to like at least like, okay, this is the reasons why it didn't work for me personally, or
And two, if somebody listens to our podcast and has a problem with the review, you can go back and listen to the however many minutes of the podcast devoted to that movie and get why we said what we said, and then either agree or disagree. Yeah. But so that's one thing. So that is interesting, especially when you start making things on your own, being like in the creative end, and you get some skin in the game. You do see like how easy it is for something to not end up how you wanted it to be. And a lot of times the biggest critic of a finished project is the director or the writer or the actors or the producer or whoever it was. Everybody involved in the project are usually harsher critics than the actual critics, but they're protective of their babies. Understandable, things like that. But there's a difference though in the YouTube channels like CinemaSins, they go and point out like, oh, they said this and did this. That's a sin. That's bad. And then point out like, oh, they used every cliche song you could think of. That's a sin. Like, there's all these things like that where it's more subjective, and the entire point is just kind of cramping on a movie to get social media shares and people to watch it and to laugh. And even though they said before, like some of the movies they've done the sins for are movies that the people behind it actually like, it can still come off as if you're attacking with no real substance something. Because, you know, if you look at any movie on continuity, there's hundreds of problems. Like rewatching our own short films where some of them are only 2 minutes long, I find new continuity errors all the time when I watch them. And it's just because, you know, it's people doing things in locations. Like, it's not a video game. You can't perfectly construct and change a background specifically. So there's a lot of stuff that can be wrong in movies.
Yeah, I never watched any of the cinemas and stuff. I may have watched one video a long time ago, but I don't really have a lot to say about their stuff. But like that type of stuff doesn't appeal to me too much, you know, like.
Well, it's interesting seeing directors though, or people on the creative end go into it with those channels, and they do those I think they've done those for even movies they love or classics. So on one hand, as you know, as a creative, a lot of times when we've made short films and put them out in the world, you kind of just have to let it go out and take your hands off of it, because you want to defend it against everybody. You're going to find one person that thinks it's amazing and somebody else that thinks it's trash. And either, you know, both opinions are equally as valid. It's just... I
mean, I like that his approach, though. He was basically tearing down any of the factual stuff. You know, it wasn't like, you know, they pointed out something like, you know, the most cliched soundtrack for a Vietnam movie. Yeah. And then he's like, well, actually, we got tracks that had never been licensed for a film before. You know, stuff like that.
Because like, if you make a Vietnam era movie, you're going to have some credence. It's just a given.
Especially the movie he made. It wasn't my favorite movie, but the movie he made was very much kind of, I mean, it was a fun Kong movie. Well, it wasn't some like dour, like horror monster movie. It was like, yeah, that was fun having that that soundtrack that he built for that.
And some of the other things they pointed at were editing decisions, like some of the match cuts between like Kong eating something and somebody eating a sandwich or something like that. So like, just interesting to see creators when they go out on a limb and kind of get into it with people, or, you know, point out things like that. So we always we make video features or things about movies. We've never tried to tear them down and point out, you know, oh, they're terrible. We just try to, you know, make an entertaining product, because we did a video, like I did a video on Troll 2 years ago and done videos on Nothing But Trouble. Both are objectively not well-written or constructed films, I think. Or, you know, I'm saying objectively. Subjectively, I think most people agree, you know, most people's opinions are that those are not well... or at least Troll 2 is a very poorly acted film and not a well-written film. Nothing But Trouble is a very odd film that's not very well-written. That's the Chevy Chase, Dan Aykroyd movie that's kind of like a Texas Chainsaw Massacre-ish comedy that's weird. But, like, so our approach isn't to try to tear anything down. We're just to point out, here's the fun parts we found in these. Some of the reviews we can come off pretty negative on the podcast, but at least there's a discussion as to why.
Well, yeah, and you're trying to be honest about it too. You know, like, again, it's never a point to like bring anybody down or, you know, bring the film down just out of spite or something. Like, it's our honest, we're just trying to give an honest opinion on it.
That's like, too, we don't review like our own stuff or like Volumes of Blood, which, you know, Sean, you directed a segment in, and then, you know, Shelby was in your segment in a different segment we worked with multiple times. And then, you know, Julie was in a segment, you know, so I can't review that. Yeah. And then Nathan directed a couple segments and wrote one. He's on the podcast. So we have to separate ourselves out from a lot of stuff.
That is the sequel. The original I did review before we had any connections with.
Yes, you had just gotten a review copy, and then that was it. And then we hadn't even made a short film at that point.
Yeah. So once we became involved with that franchise, then we just kind of, which I need to have PJ on at some point.
Yeah, we need to it's just working out timing and Skype, which just caused problems for us, which is why we're shooting a little bit different audio setup. But yeah, so there's that. Annabelle Creation still doing well at the box office, making a lot of money. Because I believe I saw a tweet from David F. Sandberg that like in 3 days it made back its production budget and marketing budget already, I think. Because it was made for like $15 million, and the opening weekend was around 35, and it's around like 64, 65 somewhere now. So I think the fact that movie did so well, with the pedigree being the sequel to a movie that a lot of people kind of hated, Annabelle, even though it made a lot of money, most people had a pretty negative opinion of it. Mm-hmm. So the fact that that's done so well makes me wonder what it's going to do when it has a big pedigree and has a lot of people who are aware of it and have this positive association with the brand because they love Tim Curry's performance as Pennywise from the 90s version. Because I know a lot of people talk about how they love the original without having watched it in 20 years. So maybe we should watch the original before we see the new one.
Was it 4 hours?
I think it was like 3 hours and 15 minutes or something. But it's a lot. It's a 2-part thing. But like, so it's gonna. I think it'll be just a monster at the box office. Like all the tracking is pointing to it having like a 50 million plus opening, and all that. Things like that. So hopefully that is a good omen for people trying to get horror off the ground. That's not just $4 million micro budget.
Yeah. And this isn't horror related, but that was it Logan Lucky or Lucky Logan?
Yeah, the Steven Soderbergh movie.
Yeah, I really want to see that this weekend, and we just did
Logan
not
Lucky.
have time. I think that was made for maybe 25 million or something. Maybe
it was pretty low
25
budget.
or 35. It only made like 8 or 9 million. But I think I remember reading the way they financed that film and paid for it was that the production was paid for and everything. They've already made that money based on pre-sales of international distribution and Netflix and all that stuff. And then so anything at the box office is total profit, and they split it between people involved in the film.
And Steven Soderbergh did like a very detailed website, because a lot of times on movies, not to get into the nuts and bolts of it, not that we know because we haven't been involved in movies that do things like this, but a lot of times on movies they'll give people like a flat rate for working on it, and then they'll give them back end points like a percentage of gross or net profits. If you give someone net profits, so that's like profits, like after everything is said and done, the problem with that is, so gross is just off the top, like your gross revenue percentage. And that's what somebody like, a high-end star like so like the Blumhouse stuff, I would assume like Ethan Hawke when he did the first Purge film, probably got back in like gross revenue points in a relatively low salary because the budget for that movie was so low. So there's things like that that probably work that way. I'm just making assumptions here. And then there are the net profit which is once the studio claims the movie's made a profit, then you get a percentage of that. But the problem with that is Star Wars and Harry Potter are money losers according to the studios that own them. So nobody ever gets paid out on those net profit points.
They essentially figured out a way to cook the books to where they're still, have lost money, so nobody gets those back in.
I believe I was listening to an interview on the Movie Crypt podcast with Adam Green and Joe Lynch with Don Mancini, the writer behind the Child's Play films and Chucky, and he tried to get like gross points recently or over the years and hasn't been able to do that, despite being like the writer and overarching like overseer of that franchise. So
Soderbergh basically he wants to be very transparent with this, and where people can log into the site, type in their account info, and then it'll say how much it's made and then their breakdown, which is awesome. I mean, I hope this has been an experiment that works. At least maybe it can fan out to other filmmakers and stuff.
Similarly budgeted projects, because the key thing for a lot of those is like people get on these projects and get paid relatively low money up front with all these percentage points, but you never actually know what you're going to get.
Yeah, it's a bummer. They only spent so much on marketing because of their financial plan. I don't know if that was like Netflix rights, VOD rights basically paid for the marketing or something like that. But like my wife, she never even saw a trailer for it, and I saw one in theaters for it. And then I don't know if I ever watched it online or not, but I only saw it once in theaters, and we go about every week. I wonder where the risk would have been. Like, should they have pumped an extra $5 million in, or maybe that's all the money they had, and they didn't want to kind of go over.
Were they doing targeted social media platform pushes on advertising and targeting the markets they thought the movie would do the best with? And then we just, for some reason, didn't fall in those target markets, or did?
It wouldn't have been teenagers. You know what I mean? Like,
it's about like a heist that goes on during a NASCAR
Daniel
race.
Craig and Adam Driver and Channing Tatum.
Yeah, and a Steven Soderbergh film.
Yeah, a heist film in a NASCAR race. Like, that's not your 15-year-old crowd. I just think they didn't spend a lot on marketing because I heard the name a lot, but I think it was from a lot of articles and stuff and very little actual promotion. But, it's a busy summer.
There's a lot of stuff coming out. So hopefully more movies in the future will have more easy to understand setups that work like that, so the people involved in the movie can more easily see what they're going to get paid at some point. Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out and see if anybody else follows that blueprint for like low budget movies that are like just offering people low salaries and promises of profit off the back end. That would be far more important, I think, to have like a very transparent system like that. So hopefully more people take that up.
I want to see it also to kind of support that. You know what I mean? It kind of I was hoping it would find more success because I kind of checked the box office numbers. We're recording this on Sunday night, just a couple hours ago. I was kind of bummed to see it only made like 8 or 9, but it's not really surprising just with how crowded it is right now.
There's too much stuff out. So, trying to remember other brief news. Sonny Landham died too. He was Billy in Predator. I think he's in a few other things. I think he's in Poltergeist as well. So it's always sad you see somebody pass away. Apparently he ran for political office in Kentucky, so he was well known in some areas like around Lexington and such.
I didn't know that.
I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Or I saw pictures of him, and the pictures of him in more recent years don't really remind me of Predator. But that was also in 1987, so 30 years ago. But yeah, so it's always sad when you see somebody pass. I saw a lot of people talking about that on social media just because Predator is such a genre staple movie that gets played on AMC and all those different channels every year. And he had one of the more iconic roles in that movie with the laugh that you hear and, going after the predator, on his own and things like that. So that's always sad. And I think that's kind of all the horror news that was out there because there wasn't a ton that happened. There was just always, speculation about stuff, but not really going down the rabbit hole of things like that. But, in terms of things we've been watching, so this past week I had a chance to finish Ozark, the Netflix series with Jason Bateman. That isn't horror, but it's a very dark themed show about a money launderer. And I think I mentioned before, there's a good amount of, I'm trying to think how to best explain it. If you watch Breaking Bad, it's kind of more like the later seasons of Breaking Bad, where kind of there's like the, character has to try to solve problems immediately. It's not the build up to how does he build a money laundering empire. It's more of once things go bad, how does he fix it? And that's all he explores. That's in the first 5 minutes of the show. So and then it's just he has to take his family.
It's the same role as in Arrested Development. His family makes problems and he's got to fix it.
Well, it's more of him making the problems. And then they have to go to the Ozarks out in the boonies at a lake and try to launder the money out there. So it's an interesting show. We mentioned before, the color palette is very blue-green, very dark. It's a show I'd recommend checking out if you enjoyed Breaking Bad or you're looking for a new adult drama show to watch that's not action and it's just, there's a little bit of stuff to do with drugs and money laundering, things like that. There's family drama, and then there's other things going on. So it's one of those shows that you couldn't put on. You could put on FX or AMC, but there's nudity in it and profanity, and there's about as much violence as you see on Breaking Bad or shows like that.
How many episodes is it?
It was 10. So it wasn't 13. It didn't overstay its welcome. It was 10 episodes. I didn't really get bored during any of them, and I enjoyed all the the people in it. Laura Linney's in it as well, so I enjoyed that show. So I'd recommend checking it out if you're looking for a new show to watch on streaming services before the October when all the other stuff hits like Stranger Things and the more genre stuff. If you want something that's a more adult drama that has to kind of scratch the itch that Breaking Bad kind of did, then I would recommend checking that out. And it's not really funny at all. It's very straight drama and dark. So Better Call Saul has comedic elements, peppered in within the more serious stuff. And this one's a little bit more straightforward and dramatic. So I'd recommend it.
Not to jump back, but what type of genre was the John Carpenter and David Hayter project? Do we know at all?
Like I said, there wasn't a ton of information on it because I was trying to find more.
I don't think there was either. I just I had kind of saw David Hayter's tweets about it or something, but yeah. So do you think there's going to be a second season of Ozark, or would you want a second season of that?
The way it left off, I think there will be. Yeah. And I think it's just more or less how does the show perform on the metrics? Because Netflix, they've gotten some criticism because for a while they never canceled anything. They kept making new seasons of shows because in some cases they're making them on the relative cheap side, like Hemlock Grove, that show that Eli Roth produced about werewolves and vampires, where the guy Bill Skarsgård that's going to be Pennywise came from.
Okay.
But they started canceling shows more recently,
Did they
like
cancel
Sense8.
that one?
Hemlock Grove, it finished.
Okay.
It only had like 3 or 4 seasons. It was not a good show. Let's see. I don't think there was much detail.
Yeah, so there's no necessarily genre.
There was just the John Carpenter's working. There was reports that he's going to work on 2 upcoming TV series with Universal Cable Productions for Sci-Fi. One of them was Tales for Halloween Night, and Nightside, based on the series by best-selling author Simon R. Green. They're not sure if the news was tied to either one of those projects or if it's something else. So it's kind of unknown. But yeah, so that was the John Carpenter stuff, and then. Like I said, it's Ozark. I don't know if they're going to be a season 2. It's set up to have one, so I'd like to see another one. Hopefully it does well enough. Watch another Netflix series that was a continuation of The Defenders, which is the Marvel series where it combines the characters from Luke Cage, Jessica Jones, Daredevil, and brings them all in Iron Fist and brings them all into one show. And it's only 8 episodes versus the 13 episodes that those like individual series were. And I think the 8 episodes, I'm only on episode 5, or I went through episode 5, is a huge improvement for the series because they trim out all the fat of those shows. Usually should have been 8 to 10 episodes, and then they were 13, as opposed to this is 8. So once it gets going, there's a lot happening.
Is it a culmination of things that have been building throughout all those series, or is it kind of just something new now?
It's more like, so the stories were kind of built through Daredevil and Iron Fist, more so than the other 2 shows, but the fact that you since all those other series occurred, you now have all the background on all the characters, so there's no getting up to speed with Luke Cage and Jessica Jones are just kind of there, and you already have the backstory.
Just jumping into a sequel like Spider-Man 2 or something.
Well, it's kind of like how like on the Marvel movies they would have the individual films for the heroes like Thor and Captain America and everything, and then have the Avengers. They all come together, and there's not a lot of build up.
Yeah.
So that approach I think works assuming you've watched all the shows, and so far I've been enjoying it. I enjoyed it way more than Iron Fist. I do wonder how much, how many of these shows we can handle, because it's pretty much all set in New York, and, how many stories, like the one thing that you can criticize Marvel about is almost all their stories take place in New York, aside from the galactic stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, does everything have to happen there? But the story they've told makes sense. But so far I've enjoyed the show. It's not going to end up like in my top 5s or anything like that. It's just, it's been entertaining, and the fact that it's only 8 episodes means like, okay, I don't have to invest 13 hours in this. I can watch over the course of like 1 or 2 weeks and not really have to. Is the
Iron Fist character better than he was on his standalone series?
When he's playing off of other people, they can point out like, oh, you're a rich white boy, and like Luke Cage points that out.
Okay.
So I think having him be part of an ensemble, it works better than being his own. And the fight choreography, they've done a little bit better because they had him wearing things that have hoods and such, so you can have like the stunt people versus having the actor's face visible, so you have to cut up a fight scene into a million pieces to make it work. So they fixed that a little bit.
It's like, at least they're learning from some mistakes. That's all you can do.
Yeah, so that I also watched, and that was pretty much all I had a chance to watch this week, aside from stuff on TV like Twin Peaks and Game of Thrones, which are both, doing a lot of stuff now.
Yeah, so next week is season finale for Game of Thrones, and then Twin Peaks we have 3 more.
Yeah, we have 3 episodes, but it's only 2 weeks because so episode 15 just aired. Next week will be episode 16, and the week after that is episode 17 and 18 because they're doing them in a 2-hour block.
Yeah,
and it'll be the week after Game of Thrones ended, so it'll have the spotlight to itself.
It's gonna be very sad when that ends, but I'm so happy they made it. Yeah, so Game of Thrones too. I was thinking about that again. How much they've accelerated that series as far as. Basically, everybody fast travels now,
Well, it used to be that it would take the majority of a season for a character to get from, like, one location to the other location, and now they're traversing those distances in less than an episode.
Yeah, and I'm not... I think they should speed it up to some degree, but it's almost insane, like, the jump that they went. And I was kind of thinking, like, okay, they've cut the episode order. The episodes are longer, though, and there is a lot more... it seems like there's, like, some pretty big battles already in this season.
Yeah.
They've spent some money. Part of me wonders, though, did they tell them, like, hey, you guys, here's the money you can have. Do you want to cut it down to, like, 8 episodes or so? Like, are they constricting the episodes because basically subscribers are just sticking with HBO now? You know, it's not a thing where they've got to extend it. So they're just like, hey, this series is almost over with. You know, here's enough money to do this many episodes and do them right.
Well, I think that they decided to do 13 episodes to finish it out a while back. I'm not sure exactly what all the business decisions were.
The episodes have been good, but I almost like...
Because I think this
some elements are almost not as satisfying because there's... You know, it's just trucking along.
Fast tracking.
It's just, it just feels like it's almost pop entertainment now. It's like, and not that it wasn't before, but I just kind of like that it could breathe a little bit. And like you would get a few of those moments still, but it's not the same.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I think there will be longer episodes in like the final 6. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I think there's space. I think there will be like a gap. They're not going to put them out like immediately. Because I think they want to have that gap to keep people subscribed while they get their other shows up and running that could possibly take the place. And they're going to do like Game of Thrones spin-offs and things like that.
Are they doing some? I thought I read something.
They've been talking about spin-offs for a while. I'm not sure exactly which stories they're going to spin off. I don't think it'll be anything connected to what we're watching now. I think it's more just kind of like expanded universe stuff.
Yeah.
But
I'd watch Brotherhood. Little mini series, maybe not like a full season, but you know, or like a full like multiple season show. But I'd love to see like 6 episodes on them or something like that. Yeah. Like that would be fun to do spin-offs like every season. Yeah, I think just pick like a new element to kind of focus on.
Yeah. So did you watch anything besides the TV stuff?
Yeah. Watch Ponyo. That anime Mizaki. I've never watched any of those. That was actually very good. I'm surprised Tina Fey is one of the voices in there.
Yeah.
It's got a pretty good voice cast. Betty White. Yeah, I like that. Only reason I watched it is because I still had stars because of... Was it because of Ash vs. Evil Dead? I guess. I finally was canceling it. And I thought... And we were looking, and she's like, "Oh," and I was like, "I've never seen any of those Miyazaki films or whatever."
Miyazaki.
Yeah, and so we watched it, and then immediately the subscription ended. So we at least saw that, but that was very good. I'm interested in checking out some more of his films for sure, or the Studio Ghibli films. And then we watched The Wicked One, which was directed by Tori Jones and Del Miller and Katie Stewart, who were in Hazard, among other things, but they were in it, and I'm trying to think anybody else of note or that we know.
I don't think there's anybody else in it that we've worked with or aware of.
So, you know, we saw that at Fright Night and enjoyed it quite a bit. And, you know, Nicole, she hadn't seen it, my wife, so I wanted to see what she thought about it, you know, because she watches a lot of low-budget horror stuff and local things, and she liked it. And I liked it again, too. Like, it was an easy watch to watch again. It's on Amazon Prime for everybody to watch for free. It's a pretty straightforward slasher, you know, moderately low budget. It has a locally produced thing that was not like a huge budget, but that doesn't mean it's like awful or bad. It's not people running around with just, you know, little video cameras and not recording audio properly or anything like that. Like they put the effort into it.
Yeah, because in low budget, in the context of low budget, what we typically mean when we say that is like when we talk about like micro budget or local indie or super low budget, we talk, you know, less than $100,000 budgets, or assuming they're less. Anything less than $1 million is low budget for a film, and anything less than $100 or $100,000 is super low budget. Mm-hmm. And you can kind of tell the budget levels based on the level of equipment used and lighting and audio and effects and locations. But I mean, they did have a number of locations, so this wasn't just like... Because I have watched a bunch of stuff on Amazon Prime over the years. Not over the years, like over the past year. And didn't talk about it a lot on the podcast. It was so bad I didn't want to just crap on people's movies.
Yeah.
Because you can get independent films on there pretty easily. And there's a lot of them where I was like, this makes us look like savants compared to what, you know, this stuff is. Just in terms of the way people have these stories. They're not lit. They don't have any audio. There's no driving narrative force. It's just stuff happens, and then they're like, oh, there's a girl's boobs out, and she's running around screaming for 10 minutes in the woods, and somebody walks up, pulls a knife up, and goes, oh, and then like you jump cut to her being dead with like ketchup on her face or something. So we're not going to talk about any movies like that ever, just because one, all we're going to do is be negative about them because it's so hard to watch. And it doesn't really do them any favors, but, you know, the stuff like Wicked One and Volumes of Blood and, like, other local stuff that we haven't had involved with regardless of what you think of the quality, they're not made like that.
Yeah. And the Wicked one, like, again, we know 2 people involved, so our opinion is tainted. But it's
can't
free.
give a review.
It's free to watch. It's not like we're out there
go
saying,
on Amazon Prime.
Go pay for it.
And then if you like it, go buy Blu-ray or DVD.
Yeah.
Same thing, like Volumes of Blood, Horror Stories, you can buy DVD or Blu-ray now. And, we don't have... Our stuff's all just short, so go watch our shorts.
Yeah.
But...
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think I genuinely, like, just kind of enjoy that as, like, a fun little light slasher, like, locally produced. But also, it's, like, half the time, I'm like, do I enjoy it this much because Dell and Katie? You know what I mean? It's hard to parse that out sometimes.
Well, because they were shooting that while we were shooting Hazard.
Yeah, so I just like, I like watching both those people act, and they do a really good job. But yeah, if you like slashers, it's a pretty straightforward one. It's not like there's a ton of gore scenes, but there's enough peppered throughout to make it interesting. And then I think, I'm pretty sure after that, I just watched Prom Night 1 and 2.
Yeah.
And then, Twin Peaks, which is phenomenal. We're still in review. Oh, John dies at the end.
Yeah.
Don Coscarelli.
Not John Coscarelli, Don Coscarelli.
Yeah. And you said you watched that before?
Yeah, I watched that months back.
I'd been meaning to watch it like when it came out, and I was kind of afraid to, because you never know. Again, some horror directors, as they get older, sometimes they do stuff and they don't have the budgets they used to or whatever. But, it was parts of it a little bit of a mess. Parts of it I liked quite a bit.
The CG at the end I thought was kind of...
So they do... The end of it was... I got some heavy Phantasm Ravager vibes from the end. They just didn't have the budget to do what they wanted to do, so it's a lot of green screen and pretty weak CGI. So really at that point, it just took me out of the story so much that I almost didn't care about any consequences. You know what I mean? I was just like... It was so distracting. It's fine if it doesn't look like, phenomenal and perfect, and it's okay but it was so distracting, it just pulled me out of the story at that point. Like I said, there's some things there's definitely Phantasm vibes out of that, as far as it just being a weird kind of world and universe these people are a part of. Yeah. And it deals with like kind of some alternate reality stuff or dimension stuff, and I really enjoyed that. And there's some like really strong moments in there. And I think some really cool ideas that if it would have been kind of handled a different way, could have been amazing. But all in all, it's a fine film. It starts off, I think, a lot stronger than it ends, unfortunately.
With the CG being overused.
Yeah, and just kind of, it becomes a very messy narrative. And was that originally a book?
It might have been. I don't remember.
I think when it came out, I remember hearing that it was an adaptation of a novel or a book. Yeah. And you could get that vibe because it feels like the world's very big. Like there's so much going on and like, lore, and it's just you get a taste of this.
Well, it's
here
like a vastly inferior work to like Coscarelli's, like the original Phantasm and Bubba Hotep. Yeah. This is, it's not bad. Like if you watch it, there is enjoyment to be found. Mm-hmm. It's just one of those things where modern day CG allowed to be created, but if CGI wasn't where it was, would they have done it more practically?
Yeah, I think if it would have had a bigger budget, some of the casting wasn't my favorite. Not that it was terrible. Yeah, it just didn't gravitate. They didn't carry the film enough. If you had maybe certain people in there. Yeah. You can almost maybe look past some of the budget shortcomings just because of the nature of whoever was maybe in it. They did a fine job, but, it didn't live up to some of the casting in his other films. But I did enjoy seeing Angus Scrimm in there, kind of as a brief role. But this probably would have been better served as like a mini series, maybe like 6-episode, hour-long thing. And if they would have had the budget to do what they wanted to, I think this probably could have... It would have helped him realize kind of the vision of this film better. But yeah, not a terrible film at all, and I was glad to finally check it out. But yeah, that was it, aside from those Prom Night movies.
So now moving to our discussion of Prom Night and the sequel, which is technically, so it's Prom Night 2, but then it's also Hello, Mary Lou, Prom Night 2. But Prom Night, we'll talk about first.
And it was originally called The Haunting of... something something, and then I think they said they rebranded it like whatever.
Well, it's Prom Night and title only. It's nothing to do with the original.
Yeah,
film.
so they were basically trying to build off the success of Prom Night, which I do think kind of taints that second film more. Almost.
Well, it's kind of like, there's a big trend for a while of sequels to movies that did somewhat well, just to take advantage of the name recognition while not really having any ties to it creatively whatsoever. So the first Prom Night, it's a 1980 movie. The basic plot synopsis from IMDb: at a high school senior prom, a masked killer stalks 4 teenagers who are responsible for the accidental death of a classmate 6 years previously. So if I told you that there was a slasher movie that came out on the heels of Halloween that starred Leslie Nielsen and Jamie Lee Curtis in 1980, that probably piques your interest. And then it's like, okay, and it's set on a prom night. It's like, well, okay, that's not rehashing necessarily Halloween because it's prom night. But then you watch it, and
the Jamie Lee Curtis stuff right away, the casting almost gives a red flag. Like, okay, they're just really trying to...
Because it doesn't seem like she was probably on set very long, because she's kind of just like in the stuff a little bit like around the school.
Well, it feels like, okay, they're just trying to build up the success of Halloween, and, they don't have any, like, I would have liked seeing some more inspired casting. Granted, they wanted to get a name, but it's like, I mean, I don't know. Not that she was the worst choice in the world, but it's
she was big at the time.
It's a cool get, but, coming off of Halloween, it's like, I don't know. It almost feels like
Halloween and Halloween
you have that
2
hanging over your film.
Now
that she's in both those films, now your film will be even more compared to that. Like, what's the better Jamie Lee Curtis slasher from this?
Too, like, it did make money for him. It was profitable when it was all said and done. But the movie, it's interesting comparing them. Like, what's the transfer of the ones we watched on Amazon Prime is just hard to watch. It's not a great transfer, so you take some of that into account with the review, just because if it was a nice, clean transfer that was widescreen and HD and looked good and was comparable to Halloween, because, there's good transfers of Halloween. If it was more comparable to that, then it's a lot easier to look at its own merits, but it just looks so much lower budget. The kills are very uninspired, and they kind of undercut the tension with any of the kills, because it's not really like a cat and mouse game usually it plays out. It's more of just like some are just kind of sudden, and then other ones play out way too long. Mm-hmm. And there's not that many kills.
We're doing full spoilers on these, right?
Yeah, full spoilers on these. I mean, these slashers are hard. I mean,
they're on Amazon Prime to watch.
Yeah,
so just
you go watch if you want to. I mean, 2, like I said, 1 and 2 have nothing to do with each other aside from the name.
Yeah. So there was one sequence I liked in 1, and it was when the girl was hiding in the classroom from the killer. Yeah. And I almost like that seemed like a normal guy. It was like a normal guy in the outfit. I liked some of that only because it was kind of interesting and I think cool that there was a lot of silence. Like when she was being chased up the stairs and stuff, there's no music. It's just running and stuff like that. And I think that was maybe it was an intentional choice, or maybe it was an unintentional creative choice, but either way, I think it worked out pretty well. It made it feel a little bit different than just, say, like a Halloween, when Michael Myers is chasing, you've got that theme. It was, I don't know, it made it feel more, it gave it a little bit more reality, I think, because it was just the sounds of him walking, her running, and then kind of her hiding in the classroom. Like, I liked that little sequence. But yeah, it just kind of kept going on and on, which I kind of liked. But for me, the entire film was almost it was almost like too straightforward. So it starts out with those kids killing their friend on accident or classmate or whatever. Yeah. And then being like, oh, don't tell anybody. They'll think we did it on purpose.
And then and then there's like the kid that saw the dead body.
Yeah.
And it's funny because when you look at this really called I Know What You Did 6 Summers Ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I didn't think about that.
Because there's a lot of those movies where somebody dies, somebody happens to find out about it, or the person lives or whatever, and then they get revenge, some number of years after the fact. And that happens a lot. I mean, Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy comes back after the kids of the parents because they burnt him alive or whatever. That there's been a bunch of stories like that where somebody comes back to right a wrong that happened years prior. And it's just that the filmmaking aspects of it just, it felt like it was going very heavily after, okay, Halloween was a slasher's popular, because I think they even said that like they wanted to make another themed day horror film. So they picked a prom day or prom night because that was something that hadn't been done yet. And it also felt very much like it was going very heavy into the Carrie aspect of the kind of visuals or influence of that movie. Yeah. But it didn't really build up any of the characters and, didn't really give you any insight into, like, there wasn't much that got you invested in anybody. And
it felt very much just like, just the bones of a slasher film and nothing to fill it out.
It was just like a concept of like, oh, it's a prom night and somebody's killing people on prom night and these kids kill people and you don't know, here's these kids, and then we jump forward in time. And maybe it just shows the level of attention I paid to the film or whatever, but I was like, which of the characters in these present day are the kids from the flashback? And
well, every now and then they would show a flashback.
Yeah.
Like they would show the character modern day and then it would like flash to the kid, which that's interestingly, that's the one of the elements from the sequel that they did use, like a narrative, a cinematic element, because they did that on the principal and the priest.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, that is actually something they kind of pulled from the first. Yeah, they kind of pulled from the first film. But other than that, I feel like they threw almost everything
that's also
else out.
just a storytelling technique that's used often when you don't make it very clear through the text of the script and the actions what exactly is going on and who everybody is. But the overall movie, like, I know they had the remake of it in 2008 or somewhat, recently. In the past 10 years, there was a remake. It was pretty poorly received from what I remember. But the original is by no means a sacred cow that you can't touch. Like, that was a movie where if somebody had a really good idea or concept, just take the name, the idea of somebody killing people on a prom night, and then you can make a better movie with it pretty easily. Because I think the nostalgia factor of it having Jamie Lee Curtis and then having Leslie Nielsen before, he was really the Leslie Nielsen that you knew from all of the... Was this before Airplane? I think it was. Because it was 1980, and then Airplane... It was before Leslie Nielsen was the Naked Gun and the comedy guy.
Was Airplane late 70s?
Airplane was 1980, so it was around the same time. So that same era, but it was before Leslie Nielsen was kind of the household name for comedy. And I think the reason that Leslie Nielsen worked so well in all those comedies was he played things straight. Everything else was bizarre and going crazy. Yeah. But seeing him in this movie, because I'd forgot that he was supposed to be in this, because I had only seen bits and pieces of these movies beforehand. And then when I actually watched it, I was like, oh, there's Leslie Nielsen, and he's almost unrecognizable.
Yeah, it doesn't really...
It's just like, oh, it's him, but he's just kind of there a little bit, and you don't really get much out of the fact that he's in it. And yeah, so it's an interesting watch from that aspect. But like I said, the filmmaking stuff too, like nothing in it that was that innovative or interesting. There wasn't much tension. The kills weren't very good. Because even the original Friday the 13th, the kills in that aren't that great. They're not... Like, the sequels got far better on the kills. This one doesn't even stand up to the original Friday the 13th at all, really.
Yeah, this kind of, again, like it shies away from showing too much. But then, again, something else I did like about it was it kind of didn't really show the... they didn't design some gore effects to show for a lot of the kills. Yeah. But then at the end... somebody's head gets lobbed off.
The decapitation was kind of fun.
And like at that point, I think it was like more effective because in the film you hadn't seen anything that violent yet. Yeah. And then all of a sudden you see a head rolling. And it's more of an impact as far as compared to something like Friday the 13th when you see like scene after scene after scene and then just kind of loses some of the impact. So I did appreciate that about it. I don't think it was probably super intentional. Maybe it was.
But the decapitation doesn't stand up to the Omen.
No. It's just the fact that, okay, we actually saw some sort of gore effect in this film, and you got to see somebody's reaction to being horrified by, it rolled out on the stage.
And then, so you have all this stuff. So you have the killer, this mass killer, it's in all black with a ski mask, just coming after these teenagers on prom night.
I just thought it was a Zodiac killer, just swung into town.
And picking people off, and none of it's, all that great. But then you have, So after the decapitation scene happens, like once they're going to announce like the prom king and queen or whatever, they like so one of the guys, so the guy's actually the prom king. Like these other bully guys like tie him up and take his place, and he's the one who gets his head chopped off. And then the
Who's
fight
got a really gnarly unibrow almost.
And then,
at least it looked like it on that transfer.
So then the actual guy, supposed to be prom king, and Jamie Lee Curtis's character get into a fight with the killer. And it's a very terribly choreographed fight scene. And it's almost laughable, and they're just kind of bungling. You could put Benny Hill music to it.
It's not great, but I also I wish it would have been better done because I like that it's a struggle against a real person.
Yeah,
and it's not like Freddy Krueger or even Michael Myers. Like Michael Myers has some kind of reality.
The sequel versions of Michael Myers.
Yeah, when he struggles a little bit, but I would have liked it if it would have been a well done version of that. Like I said, I like it when there's like killers that aren't supernatural or anything, just because
it's real people.
That's what we're
stakes are low.
That's because we're used to having so many of those.
Yeah.
And at the time, and not that it was like overblown, but
because 1980 was before all the sequels of the killers becoming immortal.
Well, that's another interesting thing about both these films is that 1980. Well, one thing I loved about it too was the disco dance sequence. I don't know why. I just enjoyed the disco element because it very much was like, okay, this is something of huge value of the film because it was made of its time, and it was like the end of the disco era, and it very much just had that, it leaned into that pretty hard.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, you can appreciate this because it was made in that era. It's not something just trying to mimic that style. This is a film made it during that time. So you can at least it has that spot of originality in it.
Well, it's like Airplane 2 has the disco scene, and it was in the 1980s, so that tail end of all that era.
Well, and then so this was kind of the beginning of the big slasher boom, the end of the disco era, and then the Prom Night 2 from '87 was almost the end of the slasher era. Yeah, and they kind of go in a different direction in it than this film, and two, it's very much like their prom is kind of the stereotypical 80s theme that you would think of in your mind. So I like the contrast between both those. But yeah, the first one, it was just very flimsy. It was very flimsy in its plot and structure, and it's nothing too shocking as far as any revelation of the killer or anything like that. Jamie Lee Curtis is not a standout in it.
She doesn't have much to do.
Yeah, so nobody's really standout just based on kind of what they're given to do.
Because in terms of your top tier slasher franchise, so your Halloween, your Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, stuff like that, I think are kind of on one tier. And then you kind of have the other tier of things like The Burning and My Bloody Valentine, and movies that on their own right are just as good as a lot of those sequels and a lot of those films and those franchises. They just didn't have the critical, or they didn't have the box office success.
They didn't have the name brand behind, previous films in the series.
A lot of times they made money and they wanted to be cult hits, but they didn't leave the cultural footprint that the other series did. But you could compare them quality-wise to a lot of those sequels, and they would, The Burning versus Friday the 13th Part 3. You can compare those movies all day long. This feels like kind of the tier below that. So you have, like I said, Tier 1. Tier 2 is the, very serviceable films that have their own fans but weren't as big culturally.
And some may be better than,
Prom Night was more successful than some of those other movies we just mentioned, I think, just box office-wise.
Yeah, just as far as, I think, entertainment value.
But in terms of influence, I don't think anybody picked up a camera, or maybe they did, but I don't think, Halloween and, John Carpenter Halloween, Wes Craven, all these people inspired generations of filmmakers with horror movies. Sam Raimi, The Evil Dead. All these people were inspirational to a ton of filmmakers. This movie, Prom Night, I don't think was one that somebody watched and then got a burning passion to go make movies, specifically horror.
Yeah.
It seemed more like a cash-in on the success of these other films that, inspired a lot of people. For a while, they wanted to have all these horror films based on days, Valentine's Day for My Bloody Valentine.
April Fool's Day, which I love April Fool's Day.
April Fool's Day. And, so I think there's a lot of these movies that wanted to have, a theme to
Black
them.
Christmas.
Which is in 74 or so, or, it was in the 70s. So, and then you, Friday the 13th was just, it was a theme too.
Which is, the theme came before the movie,
So it was a money-based operation as well. But with Prom Night, it's one of those things where, it's a lot of times, did you watch this with Nicole or just by yourself?
Oh, we both watched it.
So was she checked out as well?
Oh yeah, she was like, she was kind of in and out. Like normally I'll pause the movie and she like, I think she wanted to make some dinner or something like. So she was, we did not even pause it.
Yeah.
It was like, this was solely just a mission to watch it for this podcast because it was not, I didn't enjoy it. Like I said, I like the disco scene. I was like, okay, cool. This is something. They're really leaning into this. Let's see Jamie Lee Curtis dance for a while to disco music. And then after that, it was just...
Yeah, so, once again, the transfer was bad, so that hurts the overall experience. But, taking it out of the frame, even if it looked pristine and perfect, it still doesn't fix the structural problems of the movie or the pacing problem. So if we had to give this a score out of 10 before we move on to Prom Night 2, which I think is the one that you'll be more interested in watching in general, like out of 10, I give it like a 3.
Yeah, I'm right there with you.
Like, I think on IMDb it's like a 5.
I never want to watch this again.
Yeah, like I had only watched bits and pieces before. It's not something I need to revisit now. Even if somebody gave me a Blu-ray transfer of like, or the Blu-ray transfer of like a 4K rescan copy or whatever, it's like, still doesn't fix the problems I had with the movie. So the second film, Prom Night 2, is the far more interesting film of the two, and it's a completely different film. It's, not really a slasher so much as it is a supernatural movie because, the difference is that, like I said, it's kind of weird that they have, like, the Hello Mary Lou name, like...
Yeah, Hello Mary Lou, Prom Night 2.
Yeah, so... Let's just call it Prom Night 2 for brevity's sake.
And originally, I found out kind of what the name was. Let me see here. Now I lost it. It was called The Haunting of Hamilton High originally.
Yeah.
And then Alliance Films rebranded it, I think, and wanted to name it Prom Night 2.
So the story for this film is 30 years after her accidental death at her 1957 prom, the tortured spirit of prom queen Mary Lou Maloney returns to seek revenge. And once again, this has nothing to do with the first Prom Night film in terms of story or characters or anything. So it's a lot like Troll 1 to Troll 2. Like, the storylines don't carry over, the characters don't carry over. There might be some stylistic things like you mentioned or things like that, but it's mostly just capitalizing on a name of a franchise that already existed and producers and things like that. But creatively,
at least there was a prom night in both of them, because some films they make, where they do that, it's like, there's absolutely nothing at all.
Because like the poster for Prom Night, the first one, is better, more entertaining than the movie, and because it shows the guy with the black mask and like a knife or a shard of glass or knife or whatever that's reflecting something in it. So this one shows the prom queen in like a locker. So this one does have more to do with the school. It's essentially, like we said, in 1957, the prom queen gets killed because she gets caught on fire by a guy that was... Her boyfriend sees her macking on some other dude, so in order to try and get revenge... And we'll do full spoilers. Like I said, it's on Amazon Prime, so you can go watch it if you want.
And I recommend watching this one.
Yeah, this one has more to see in it. And the guy drops a stink bomb, which looks like a stick of dynamite, and it catches her dress on fire. He climbs on the scaffolding above to get back at her for making out the other guy, drops the smoke bomb, or the stink bomb, and it catches her dress on fire, and she burns to death while nobody does anything.
Yeah.
And everybody kind of watches, and then she's dead.
And the guy she was, I guess, making out with in the back, he's the one that's watching from the stage, right?
Yeah, he's the one who's close to her.
And he's like almost jumping up there, but never actually goes up there to save her.
And then the guy that she was dating, who caused her to get caught on fire and die, is played by Michael Ironside in the present part of the story, which takes place in like the 80s. And then you have like the kids of all these different characters involved.
Which, so the kids in this film, in the high school, they fleshed them out just enough. I like...
Yeah, there's more going on.
Yeah, and they weren't... There was none that was super annoying. Or, you had your stereotypical kids on some degree, but it was nothing... They weren't flimsy. I feel like this was a pretty, like, surprisingly really well-written film,
and
I think.
your lead character, your kind of lead character, Vicky... starts to see stuff about Mary Lou and then becomes possessed by her at one point.
Yeah, she's kind of... so Vicky, the main character, her mom is really religious and conservative.
So kind of echoes of Carrie again.
Yes, and Vicky is not, she's not super conservative, but she's a good kid. She seems like a well-rounded kid. Her boyfriend, he rides a motorcycle, but he's not like a bad person at all. Like they both seem like they got good heads on their shoulders, and they seem very sensible about a lot of things. But Mary Lou, we even saw, like, I think when the film opens, she's in confession talking about, like, sleeping with a lot of men.
Yeah.
And then she says, to the priest or whatever, like, and I loved every minute of it or whatever.
Yeah.
So Vicky is not that character. And then essentially her mom doesn't want to give her money to go to the prom.
Yeah.
She goes back behind the stage to look for the props and costumes that the school has, and then kind of opens up the chest that has some of Mary Lou's stuff from the 1957 prom. And after that, that's when kind of Mary Lou is unleashed upon the school and Vicky. And
then there's a weird scene too later in the film where Mary Lou, I guess, like, possesses Vicky and has Vicky, like, make out with her dad.
Yeah.
It's like a very disturbing scene.
Yeah, it seems Mary Lou is,
very promiscuous.
She's into making people feel awkward too, because she also, Vicky's best friend, she takes off all her clothes and follows her into the shower. Yeah. And then, starts like making out with her and stuff and making her friend feel very uncomfortable. This film, I was thinking, like, oh, this is kind of, it gave me some Exorcist vibes, because it was a lot of religious elements in there. And then too, like, I love that it felt like Nightmare on Elm Street in a lot of regards too, because some of the sequences were so fantastical, and especially when Vicky starts, like, I guess, hallucinating or whatever, like, she's not sure about what reality is, and like, she falls into the chalkboard and it turns into a pool and stuff,
which was a cool effect.
Yeah, it was awesome. And I think I got looking, and they specifically said, like, they wanted to, like, they were influenced by Nightmare on Elm Street, Carrie, and The Exorcist, which is. And also, too, they used...
An interesting mix.
Yeah, they used some names of a lot of horror film directors. Like, I think her last name is Vicky Carpenter.
Yeah.
And they said George Romero, Wes Craven, Todd Browning. I didn't catch all of those.
Yeah, it's Vicky Carpenter, and then...
Somebody's named Mr. Romero, and I wasn't sure. I saw it in the credits. But honestly, a lot of the sequences in this film...
Mr. Craven.
Like, her friend dies right away. And that's how you... It's kind of... interesting to see how slasher films balance this stuff. Like, they're going to start picking people off throughout the film, because if people start dying, then everybody has a heightened level of awareness, So it's like, once it starts getting higher and higher, then people are being more careful. And then at that point, it's kind of it can be less fun because people are kind of aware. Yeah. In this film, her friend dies in an awesome sequence where she almost gets her head cut off with a big paper cutter because of Mary Lou, and then she, like, gets hung, and people assume it's suicide because she had just told Vicky that she was pregnant and all this stuff. So from this point on, I wondered if people were going to start getting picked off, but really it's like Vicky's being terrorized with these sequences, and she really, she knows something's going on. So I think that was a really cool balance, as far as, instead of just killing a bunch of people or all the kills taking place on prom night or something, it was, her being terrorized essentially, and then she transitions to Mary Lou. Like, there was always changes and a really good flow to the film, I think, and it kept it interesting throughout.
Well, and two, there was one kill in this that I had not watched this movie for this podcast, and so there's a character that gets in a locker, and then the locker gets crushed, which is a very cool kill.
Yeah.
And then I was like, where have I seen that? The Lazarus Effect, the movie that came out that had Olivia Wilde and Mark Duplass from a year or two ago, had a kill that was almost the exact same thing. So I was like, so they kind of pulled that kill directly. And I'm not sure if anybody else had done that before that movie. Yeah. But that was a very effectively done, cool moment.
Yeah, there was, like, some really cool sequences of the film. And honestly, like, for me, the kind of, fantastical sequences and all this stuff, like, I enjoyed this more than a lot of the Nightmare on Elm Street films. Well, like, just because I liked Vicky's character and Mary Lou, I just think it was more interesting than some of the Nightmare sequels, when it's just Freddy again, and you kind of don't care about the characters being terrorized.
Is this one kind of remind me of, like, the second film, second Nightmare on Elm Street film? I'm forgetting the subtitle, Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
I can't either.
Freddy's Revenge or whatever.
And I like that one a lot, actually.
Like a lot of those, it tells you how much those movies kind of blend together when you can't remember the names.
I just think this film, they really, it does share a lot of similarities with, some other films like, The Exorcist and all that.
Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Phrase Revenge.
Okay.
This kind of like feels similar to me in a similar era too, 85, 87.
Yeah. So I think they just, the filmmakers, I think they kind of knew their films and they smartly incorporated a lot of different elements, and it didn't feel like it was a one-trick pony. Like Prom Night feels like, oh, we saw Halloween, let's just try to make one of those.
Let's take a holiday or an event or a name and make a movie based around it.
Yeah, I mean, you can appreciate this when they bring in all those different elements and they blend them very well, I think.
Yeah, and just the locker sequence and the chalkboard sequence. And like you have like the paper cutter and where's that gonna go? Like all that is very inventive visually.
And it's not just somebody running with a knife,
And two, you have the element of the main killer, instead of being like a Freddy Krueger where it's a child murderer or molester or rapist or whatever the backstory version you would believe on that character. It's more of just a young girl that was troubled and doing a lot of stuff and got killed by a jealous boyfriend. And came back as a spirit and did some really heinous stuff with a character who is a pretty straightforward, nice character. And
it was a little bit similar in that Michael Ironside, I believe nobody knows that he did that, right? Aside from the preacher.
Yeah.
I mean,
the preacher kind of make cahoots.
Yeah. That was kind of what it was insinuating. So it's almost like the original in that.
Well, there was not even related to the story. There was this one scene where I'm pretty sure what I saw was the boom mic in the scene for quite a bit of it.
Was that the first one?
Ironside went to see the priest.
Yeah, Nicole pointed that out too.
I was like, is that the boom mic?
Yeah, she said it kept moving and I couldn't see. I'm half blind.
So, and two, like in the movie, you kind of expected the movie to be about the comeuppance of like Michael Ironside and the priest. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really go in that direction. Michael Ironside, like I said, full spoilers, like through the end of the movie, he's alive, but then theoretically he's possessed by the spirit of Mary Lou after the two kids survive, Vicky and Michael Ironside's character's son, which I'm blanking on his name now.
Yeah.
But so it was more of just like the spirit of this girl like killing people for really no reason, but not really going after. It's not like a revenge tale necessarily.
Yeah, I think she was going after Vicky's boyfriend. I think because
he was the son.
Because he was the son of Michael Ironside. She went after the priest because he didn't help put her out, I think.
Yeah.
And then I think he went after, I'm not for sure why she killed Vicky's, one of Vicky's friends, but the other friend, she kind of said like, oh, he's with me, scram.
Yeah.
And then that's when she got killed after that.
Yeah.
So I don't, it's not always totally clear, but for being and then she killed the computer guy, which was a very 80s death. When he gets killed with electric, that was the worst.
She killed him with electricity because he was going to change the winner because some girl gave him fellatio.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting a death. It was like, because when I was watching this movie, I didn't really look at the year it was made until I was watching. I was like, what year was this made? Because they have a computer, but it's very like, Apple II or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, it's 1987.
There's a huge separation between the era of, again, the first Prom Night and this one. Like, technology is just everything.
The first one is the end of the disco era, the slasher boom. This one is after the slasher boom has kind of died, which is why it's less of a slasher, more of a supernatural film. That you still had the sequels to like Nightmare on Elm Street that were doing good business, and some of like the sequels to like Halloween and Friday the 13th and stuff. It started to die down some. So this movie was more of a supernatural-esque thing, and at the box office, it did not achieve the same success as the first one.
Yeah, I really like that they kind of, decided to pull from a lot of different films. Yeah. I instead of just going a traditional slasher route, I love anything that it tries to be more inventive, even though they unabashedly pull influences. I think they made a really good blend of a film with this. Yeah, and it is still just like a pretty straightforward, film that mixes Nightmare on Elm Street and The Exorcist, but at the same time, for being one of those films, I think it's very good.
Yeah. So it's one of those things where it's on Amazon Prime, and like I said, juxtapose the two. You don't need to watch the first one to watch this one. There's no continuity stuff. So like we said, there's inventive set pieces in it. The story is better written. You get more time with the characters to actually have a little bit of build up and care about them, and you kind of have a focal point character to care about versus all these other characters, like multiple characters. Because Jamie Lee Curtis in the first one's more of just like, oh, she's there, and she was a name,
and it makes it more interesting because not only is she a focal point character, then she becomes the villain. So you care about her on two levels. You're like, oh, you don't want anybody else to get killed by her, but you don't want her to die as well.
Oh, but can she get free of this?
Yeah.
And it does feel like a little bit of a cheat when that happens, but yeah. So the overall movie, like Prom Night 2, out of the two prom nights, the second one is the one to watch. Yeah,
I would watch this one again. Absolutely.
So for giving it a score out of 10, so for the second one, I give it like a 6.
Yeah, I would give it.
Or 6.5.
I would give it a solid 7 at least, I think.
Because, to me, anything it's like 5.5 up is worth watching. Some stuff that's like a 4 or so, just because it's so bad it's good. If it's like a 1, 2, or 3, it's just because it's so boring you can't watch it. So, it's more than double the score for me of the first one.
Yeah.
It's a far more watchable film.
And I'm not one to, watch the Nightmare films over and over again or Friday the 13th. I like those films. They're never, the things that I gravitate towards the most as far as horror goes. But this film, I think, out of all that stuff, this appeals to me on a lot of levels, a lot more than a lot of those films do.
Yeah.
So I definitely, if you're a Nightmare fan, I definitely think check this film out because it's inventive like those.
Yeah, you don't need to watch the prior one. I mean, I think so that we didn't watch the third film, but the character of Mary Lou does return in the third film.
Yeah, but apparently none of the other characters do.
Yeah, and who knows the quality level just because.
Yeah, based on the end of this one, I looked up the third one immediately. It was like, oh wow, is Michael Ironside? If that was the case, I was gonna seek that out. But I don't think you can rent that on Amazon Prime, that one or 4. But there's a DVD double pack you can buy.
Yeah, so you can watch that one on Amazon Prime. It's still the 4:3 letterbox thing where it's not the widescreen version, but it is a much better transfer. It's far more watchable than Prom Night. So if there's bad YouTube copies or whatever out there, watch on Amazon Prime instead, or buy one of the copies of it. Like I said, it's kind of sad that the first one had more box office success than the second one, because I wonder how much of the second one is. Like I said, it's the slasher boom already kind of died out, because that was kind of in '84 when the big glut of those films kind of stopped. So it's a sequel to a film that probably didn't have the greatest reputation at the time.
Especially if you did compare it to Halloween, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, I can see them be they're making another prom night. Well, that's, Yeah,
we weren't asking for that.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sure some people were, because the first one did make money, but, it was much more of just a time and place movie that I don't think plays as well. Because the first one, I don't think you could turn that on a Halloween party and people be all that into it. This one, that's more likely you could get somebody's interest and somebody would be interested in watching it.
And it's not it's not as well known as the other one. So it's not something people have seen over and over.
Yeah.
You may be able to show them something new.
Yeah, so I guess I'll wrap up our discussion of Prom Night 1 and 2. So the basic synopsis is don't watch 1, watch 2.
Only watch 1 if you just want to be a completionist.
Yeah.
And I heard 3 I've heard some people say that's almost more of a straight comedy.
Yeah.
And then I've heard some people say it's a comedy, but it's not funny.
Yeah.
I'm interested in checking out those 3 and 4.
Yeah.
Just because I've
already sunk the time in.
Yeah.
Already sunk in 3 hours so far.
And so Days of the Dead 2, who was the winner of our tickets?
So we had a giveaway for Days of the Dead. It's going to be in Louisville, September, is it 1st, 2nd, 3rd?
Yeah,
it's Friday through Sunday. And we'll be there doing some coverage of it. We had a free pair of tickets to give away. We did a Facebook giveaway, and I believe it was Jason Mills one.
Mm-hmm. Mills was the last name. I thought it was Jason.
So we had one set of tickets to give away because Days of the Dead gave us some to give away for a giveaway. But you can be on the lookout for our coverage of that show when we do go. Mm-hmm. And as of right now, I'm actually going to be speaking at the Independent Filmmakers panel that's on Friday night at 8 p.m. Not sure who else is going to be in that. No, PJ will be in it. PJ Starks, who is part of Volumes of Blood. I'm not sure who else is in it. But it's going up against the Tony Todd panel, so I'm not sure if people are going to be there. But,
I'll be there.
Yeah, and then at midnight, they have the film festival goes on throughout it. At midnight, the Louisville Gore Club is hosting a section of it, and they'll be playing some of our short films, and then the world premiere of the movie Crazy Fat Ethel which is
a remake. Somebody locally got the rights to that. Actually, is that what we were extras in?
We were extras in that.
Yeah.
One scene that's, I think, I don't know if it's in the final movie. It was in like one of the trailers. So if you're gonna be Days of the Dead, you can come out and say hey, and go to that screening at midnight on Friday, or technically Saturday morning, which is midnight.
But Friday.
But Friday night we'll be at that panel and the screening some of our stuff, and we'll be there throughout the weekend. So you can come say hello if you'll be there. But make sure to follow us on social media for all the updates on that, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube.
And we're seeing Bruce Campbell tomorrow night on Monday, so maybe we'll have an Instagram pickup of that too.
Yeah.
His little tour thing.
Yeah, maybe there'll be some
write a little bit about
Instagram stuff going on.
And we'll be able to talk about that on the next podcast.
Yeah, not sure exactly what all it consists of yet, because he's doing a tour for his newest book with kind of like a game show type element to it. So we'll have more to report on that when the next podcast rolls around. So follow us on social media. Make sure to give us a review in iTunes if that's how you're listening, because that helps other people find the podcast. It does us a huge favor if you can take a second and do that. Like I said, you can find us all the stuff on the website. We'll have some new short films after the slasher that I did, plugged that Chad did, coming out in the upcoming months, so keep an eye out for those. And then if you want to find us specifically on the internet, you can find me on Twitter at Will_Droid.
And I'm at SplevensSean on Twitter and at Sean2D2 on Instagram.
Yep, and that will bring this episode of the House by Video Store podcast to a close. Thanks for listening.